hate these glasses. Let's get this glare. I don't think I need them. Hi everyone, welcome to Trending Topics. My name is Zach Haller. We will see how the connection is here. It's been good in my new apartment so far, but I had trouble with Mike Sinato on his stream last night, so we'll find out. Definitely type to me if there is audio connection issues or if there are other connectivity issues. And what else was I going to say? If, I'll just do another broadcast another time on this topic if we don't have good connection, but I'm going to give it a few minutes before we get started. So the general gist of our Thursday night rendezvous trending topics is to discuss three things: what's trending, what's not, and what certainly should be. And we have one rule on trending topics, and that's regarding alcohol, or water is life, or anything that you want to drink, or if you want to go beyond drinking, whatever vice makes you feel nice. The rule is, when I drink, you drink, so we can practice. And I have a bad feeling about this because it's a challenge between lighting and connectivity are the two challenges of getting your live stream to work out. So tell me if this works out. I did see the Podesta interview. Okay, so let me know if the connection gets bad again. Sorry, give me 1 second to fix my little tripod here. Okay. Alright guys, my name is Zach Haller. Welcome to Trending Topics. Hopefully this works out connection-wise. It looks like things are going. Make sure to share this video. We're going to talk about controversial things, which just keeps happening, which is my favorite, so that's great. So share it with people that like rabble-rousing, and tell me in your comment box here where you're from. I'm out here in Seattle, and I'm drinking a nice cold beer, and I normally don't like to do, so I want to start doing local product placement. So if you know people that want to send random local products to me, and I'll put them in the show, feel free. Right now I'm just drinking what's known as Vitamin R here in Washington, the cheap beer in Washington, and I actually really, really love it. It's like comparable to like PBR, but even better than PBR, and I really enjoy it with some lime or lemon or whatever. So that's what I'm drinking. So when I drink, you drink. Let's get going. So there's so much randomness going on in the internet, in the news. John Podesta just had an interview. I'm just going to mention this really quick because you just need to watch the full video. There's like a 10-minute interview on Fox News where he just gets brutalized by the truth. It's amazing. This Fox News anchor, and I haven't seen her before, so I've read her name, but I don't remember what's in her past. So even if she's a terrible person in the past, she did this right, and she spoke on behalf of us. And it was legit. So make sure to watch that Podesta interview. He is in hot water. There's so many people in hot water that it gives me anxiety even try to think about talking about everything. But I'm working on some articles that are going to go in addition to some of these live streams. So basically, yeah, watch that Podesta email. The whole Democratic establishment is basically collapsing right now, which is amazing, obviously. We've got the DNC under all these lawsuits. We've got Loretta Lynch now in super hot water for quashing the FBI investigation on Hillary Clinton, which I'll circle back. And yeah, and then the mainstream media is also collapsing too. But let me just talk on that real quick about the Loretta Lynch and FBI investigation situation, because this is so juicy. And part of the reason that I think that it was really kind of important that Hillary Clinton ran for president, whether she wanted to or not, was that everybody was expecting her to, and they were doing so many basically illegal things going into the campaign. They basically were relying on her, Barack Obama included. They were relying on Hillary Clinton to become president so she could pardon all of these people, right? Because they were all up shit creek together, all guilty together, and were just relying that they would win so Hillary would be able to make sure nothing happened to any of the people that were guilty parties the whole time. So it's just like this total hubris that they were gonna obviously win. And with Loretta Lynch getting busted, so the fact that Hillary was running for president obviously gave her the opportunity to have a press relationship, which gave her the opportunity to use the press to quash scandals around her, right? If she wouldn't have ran for president, so the point that I'm making now is part of what Hillary Clinton did in running for president was not just to try and become president, but it was also to try and protect her from what she'd been doing for all this time, because the uniqueness, obviously, running for president is a big thing, but the uniqueness of running for president gave her the opportunity to be in touch with the press, gave her the opportunity to be, obviously she could have been in touch with the press otherwise, right? But with the campaign and the donations coming in, all the different reasons, it gave them a chance to control the narrative as all of the information would be coming out about her State Department emails and all of that stuff, which was going to come to light. And if she were running a campaign, she'd be able to use her press relationships to try and minimize that. And she also could use that as a way to basically, we saw all these immunity deals, and it was just kind of this way to give her opportunities to lessen the blow of the FBI investigation, the other corrupt kind of underpinnings that were coming out over the course of her campaign. And obviously part of that was using Loretta Lynch, who's a long-term Clinton family person, and obviously intertwined into the Obama administration at that time. She was obviously picked to help protect both the Clintons and the Obamas. So, and then the fact was, obviously, this was the whole continuation of the Obama presidency into Hillary Clinton's, so everything kind of was supposed to just be smoothed over. James Comey was supposed to be part of that. And, you know, obviously he probably wasn't supposed to say that Loretta Lynch told him to call the FBI investigation, right, an investigation, a matter. If the FBI is doing any type of matter, obviously the FBI is involved. So even just an FBI matter is still an investigation that's happening by the FBI, right? They would have a different entity doing it if it weren't requiring the FBI. So calling anything done by the FBI a matter still should have the gravity of it being an FBI involved investigation that they're not just doing for fun because they don't police casual things, right? But that it was exposed that James Comey was told to downplay it. Not only was obviously part of him trying to help Hillary Clinton get elected and part of the whole process of conglomerating the DNC, the media, and the Hillary Clinton campaign to protect her and get her to be president, it was not only just to help her become president in downplaying the FBI investigation, it was also downplaying the FBI investigation to minimize the severity of any possible outcome to her or all of the other guilty parties. Obviously, people really think about the concept that she was going to be president. She was trying to downplay an FBI investigation. That's bad as a candidate running for president. Obviously, running for president under FBI investigation is a new low, and that's why they had to make up this FBI story about Trump to try and be like, oh, I know you are, but what am I? So Clinton obviously was trying to downplay the FBI investigation to make her seem more suitable for president, which is just an absurd statement to begin with, because only in America do we have a person running for president who is under FBI investigation. But not only was James Comey downplaying the investigation to increase Hillary's chances of being president and for the express purpose of helping Hillary Clinton, it also was helping minimize the likelihood that regardless of Hillary won or not, that she wouldn't be charged, or none of her people in her administration in the State Department or following that would be charged by that very FBI investigation. So it wasn't just downplaying it from a campaign perspective and trying to help Hillary Clinton collude, which happened. Obviously, that's a huge problem to begin with. But the underlying element here is that ultimately, regardless of the fact that a campaign was happening, the FBI director was told to publicly downplay an FBI investigation. And that is an effort to minimize the results of an FBI investigation. So obviously Comey slipped, and fortunately Grassley and the Senate Judiciary Committee has been grilling the shit out of these people through these letters through Grassley's office, which I'm no fan of Grassley in general, but his letters are eviscerating and amazing and detailed and asking specific questions that need to be answered and exactly the questions that should be answered. I think they're really strong letters. Drink. Okay, so I'm drinking, I mentioned it before, but I'm drinking Vitamin R, the local crappy beer out here in Washington, because still I'm on my honeymoon phase about living in Washington. And so, the whole Clinton campaign, the three elements of the DNC's collusion strategy are all collapsing right now, and I'm trying to get this article done, and Godspeed after this live stream that I can do it. But basically, the DNC is collapsing, the Clinton campaign is collapsing because of the FBI investigation, and the mainstream media is collapsing. CNN, New York Times, the whole thing is collapsing, all three tiers of it, and it's amazing. We have to drink to that because it's fucking amazing. They're all happening at the same time, and every single thing that happens to one or the other breaks them all down even further. Unfortunately, Bernie Sanders is kind of tied into this whole situation, right? And that's the real unfortunate thing. It's like, oh, if only Bernie Sanders would have turned his back on the Democratic Party at any point. He didn't, right? So that kind of is a reasonable segue to talk about the next topic that I wanted to touch on tonight, which is Bernie and the Draft Bernie movement, or whatever this thing is called. So the first thing that I need to say about Bernie Sanders is, well, a real quick background about me. So I am just some random ass person. I loved Bernie when I was very young. Long backstory, but I'm gay. Happy Pride Month. And when I was very young, I started reading, trying to find support for gay people, and the only person who I found that was saying nice things about gay people was Bernie Sanders, and I found this in the early 90s. And so and then after that, I'm also, ever since I was little, like, as soon as I remember being conscious, I was like, I could never hurt a person, and as soon as I learned about war, I was like, I could never, ever, ever fight in a war. How could, if I was told by the government to fight in a war, how would I get out of that? There's no way I could ever hurt someone. And so I looked up peace advocacy, and the first name that I found was also Bernie Sanders. So my whole life, I have been, like, my brain, my sexuality, like my peace with my sexuality and my understanding that I deserve equal rights, that was formed to me as a child in the 90s by Bernie Sanders, as well as my peace advocacy that I've stuck with my entire life to oppose every single possible war, because violence is never the answer. There's no moral cause that violence is the answer for. So my whole life, my whole brain has been built and shaped by Bernie. I'm 33. I was born in 84, and I started reading about this when I was like 8 or 9, right when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was happening, and that's what was triggering me to think about being gay and fighting in the war and things like that. So I've been a long Bernie fan, and I obviously, no, I guess I shouldn't say obviously, what he's done, he has more virtue and more integrity than the entire DC political system combined. He is an outstanding overall, and up until he endorsed Hillary Clinton, basically, he was the anomaly of just purity in good sense and fairness and justice forever, up until he endorsed Hillary Clinton. And, you know, to what extent he started deciding to manipulate voters to join the Democratic Party, because he was independent for his whole career, right? And that was what was so attractive about him, was that he was running against the Democratic Party in all of his independent elections in Vermont. He was running against the Democratic Party. Listen when I say that. Bernie got to this point running against the Democratic Party. If people forgot that, it's like he's in the Democratic Party now. When he went on the Unity Tour, I was like, all right, well, so much for any chance that he's going to step back out and run against the Democratic Party again. He's obviously still going to do his thing when he decides about his reelection as an independent in Vermont, but it's really important to me that Bernie ran against the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and that's part of what made him so attractive as a presidential candidate and what makes him such an outstanding public servant in general, in my opinion. Now, I am, as I mentioned, very, very, very allergic to and opposed to war and violence at all times, at all costs. Absolutely, absolutely can never understand why anyone would want to even joke about violence or inflicting violence on another person. And the idea of that gives me the worst heebie-jeebies, and I can't even fathom the idea of people wanting to make money off of killing machines. Like, that's too far for me to even fathom. And so I am a very obsessive person about peace. And I obviously, probably for my whole life, I'm never going to live in a peaceful world, but the least I can do is talk about it in every chance I get to talk to people about what we need to be doing to try and create a more peaceful world at all times, right? The world can always be improved, right? Hope everybody agrees with me on that like the world isn't in like a perfect state. And just a general rule for life, advocating for peace is a good thing, right? Unfortunately for us who live in the United States, we live in a country that's got an unbridled military, the biggest one in the history of the world, and is getting bigger. And now Donald Trump runs it. Literally, this is the worst case scenario for anyone who wants peace and demilitarization and arms embargoes and love. Like, it's insane to me how much has opened up under Barack Obama. It was bad before Obama. He made it worse and was so out of control, planned it for Hillary Clinton to take it over. Like, he was like, oh, somebody's good. She'll be driving. She knows what I'm doing. She'll be able to make sure this doesn't go wrong. Yeah, no, botched that like many other things. And now Donald Trump is in charge of all of the ridiculous undoings that Barack Obama did, because they're all idiots to some extent that are driven by greed and driven by short-term profits and not driven by actual motivation to make a peaceful world. It's all the gangster. Cornel West nailed it in his piece, Pity the Sad Legacy of Barack Obama. He nailed it. It's called the gangsterization of the economy. The American economy gangsterized every industry to the point that it's predatory. Banks are predatory. Health insurance companies are predatory. Pharma is predatory. Every single thing is predatory. Every single thing is predatory. Caitlin Johnstone and I did a podcast she released today, U.S. time, and we compared healthcare. It's ridiculous that in the United States we can't just like, oh, I'm sick, I'm going to the doctor, I don't have to ask a question, I don't need to know anything. There's just a doctor in my community. I show up, I go in, I go out, and it's just taken care of. That should literally be that should literally be how it is. That we are being denied that's a crime. The country's not poor. We have plenty of money. So that's my unraveling of this underlying point that I'm a very obsessive person about advocating for peace. And so when I have had a role model my entire life, and any of us who have appreciated Bernie for all of this time, appreciated Bernie's anti-regime change, everything. Bernie, in part of what his genius is he gave people the words. This is what I learned his words when I was 8, 10 years old, learning words. So my favorite hypothesis, because I have one in the world, is called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. And I'll post this later, but if you're not familiar with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, you should look it up. It's, within 1984, it's a familiar concept, but the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is a linguistic hypothesis that what the words that you know affect the way you think. And it's like the most clear as day thing to me ever, because obviously if you know words, you can think about them more often, right? And your mind wants to think, your imagination wants to work, it wants to go places, it wants to find things. So the words you know affect how you think. And when I was young and I learned Bernie's words, those affected the way I think. And part of what was so amazing about his campaign was his messaging and how consistent it was and how much he taught everyone what to say to oppose the bad things that are going on in the world. One of those things that he taught us how to describe was regime change. The phrase regime change is a perfect way to describe politely what the United States has done in terms of overthrowing governments in other countries for basically as long as I'm aware of that the United States has really kind of existed. The CIA, at least in the last 50 years, there's been a lot of regime change, right? What has the CIA been doing in terms of, just don't even get me started on how many democracies we've meddled in, and meddling in them is like a bastardization of reality, because meddling is the politest word to say. We've basically overthrew them with our military. So Bernie, it deserves a huge amount of credit for how much he has taught the American people, how much he has taught the world. Everything about Bernie and the education that he's brought to the world goes without saying. You can't even probably, especially with like the rise of the social media and the internet and the millennial generation, the only person I think that could have possibly influenced the general American literacy of politics is Noam Chomsky. And he's off in kind of academia. So I don't consider Noam Chomsky's work to ever have been as highly accessible as Bernie Sanders' campaign information was. And you go to Bernie Sanders' website, you go to his Twitter page, when he was running for president, his writing was on point. And part of that was really good writing about opposing regime change and against the militarism of the United States. Coming back to this whole spiel about my draft Bernie situation, my first red flag about Bernie in general is that he is now parroting the deep state's anti-Russia, pro-regime change, remove Assad lines. And yes, he's made one or two minor tweets about it, but he used to hard line against that. And when he was hardlining against Trump's voice on that, and Trump was better than Hillary on regime change, obviously, but when he was hardlining against the Republicans and against Hillary Clinton against regime change, that to me was one of the biggest selling points of Bernie. And when he took Hillary Clinton's side, it took him a while, and it wasn't until after the election he started on the Unity Tour, but he basically completely gave up his regime change narrative. And not only did he give up his narrative about opposing military interventionism, he also started saying the same goddamn mainstream media bullshit that was straight out of the Hillary Clinton playbook. And the Syrian situation right now is, in my opinion, the most urgent crisis that anyone in our world is dealing with. Literally. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I know I speak in hyperbole sometimes. But honestly, we've got a lot of problems. Lots of problems. Not going to deny you that. In my opinion, my concept of our biggest, most urgent problem right now is Syria. And everything related to the military intervention that's trying to succeed in removing Assad. So every other political wedge issue ever want to talk about, you can, to me, trickles down from there. And so, Bernie is wrong on this. And Bernie has a lot of credibility. As we know, Bernie is the most popular politician in America, for good reason, all of which I described. That's also a huge responsibility that he has to not misuse the authority and the respect he has. So when he starts saying things like, yes, we should remove Assad, he has a lot of people that listen to him, and if they're believing that, that's a problem. If they're parroting that, that's worse. If they're not calling him out for it, I think they should be. And this is my biggest problem with Bernie right now. I want to love Bernie. I've got lots of issues with him, unfortunately, but the biggest one is Syria. And I don't think if anyone, to me, appreciates the real true heart and meaning of Bernie Sanders that transcends he as a flawed human being and looks at Bernie as kind of this like perfect, pure, progressive character, in my opinion, you should be just as appalled by his support for regime change in Syria, in addition to the other countries that we're bombing, right? 3-7, right? We've got Bernie not saying enough, not doing enough, and it commingled in the Democratic Party, which was at war for 8 years under Obama, and is not only a party of war at this point, but is also arguing in court that they have the right to rig the primaries, and also is been exposed for massive pay-to-play and bribery scandals. So the concept that Bernie is, A, not denouncing war, to me is a huge problem, and disagree with me all you want. That's fine. I will not change my stance. I abhor violence, and in every breath of my life will act in a way to try and de-escalate anything going on, because I legitimately believe the Martin Luther King quote that says, those who love peace must organize as effectively as those who love war. And so maybe for the people who love war on that part of the spectrum, I am on the other side of the spectrum that loves peace so much that I'm gonna say, sorry Bernie, I know we love you in general, but your fucking calls for war is unacceptable, period. And so until Bernie starts correcting that, you can't, in my opinion, be touting his name around and expecting any of us to be like, oh yeah, totally Bernie. Oh, totally Bernie. I'm just like, the major urgent world crisis that is putting us in a conflict with the nuclear-armed superpower. Oh, it's just no big deal. I'm totally thinking about 2020 and who I want to vote for now. I have no idea what's going to happen. Like, unravel it all. And in my opinion, if you're like, I'm not telling anyone what to think. You can have your own brain and draw your own conclusions. If you are curious as to what I think the most urgent crisis facing Americans and people of the world are right now, that would be Syria. And if you think, and my opinion in terms of leadership on Syria is it is slim to none. And if you ask me what Bernie Sanders is doing, it's not enough. And not only is it not enough, it's dangerous and reckless, and particularly so for him because of the platform that he built for himself and the platform that we gave him, partly because he opposed the war. You can't just turn this narrative around on war when people are dying in Yemen in the most horrific ways, between famine and unconstitutional bombings. Unbelievable. Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. How many countries are we militarizing right now? These are real people's lives, and Bernie could be doing more. And if he weren't in the Democratic Party's swamp of corruption that is invested in these wars, Bernie would be doing more. And at any moment, he could break out and change. But until then, Bernie's not doing enough. And I don't want to be on this tangent for too long, so I'll move along. But that is my first and foremost beef with Bernie. So let it all be known, everybody. Like, I'll criticize this and that, and you can cherry pick which tweets you want to be mad at me for, whatever. I don't care. It's not, obviously just post it, right? But underlying everything to me is my ultimate frustration that Bernie is not only still helping the Democratic Party keep people in the fraudulent party, but also is promoting and participating in the Democratic Party's support for regime change in Syria. And I mentioned this again yesterday, but I think that the big problem with the single-payer conversation right now is that a lot of Democrats are not talking about Syria, and that's part of the reason that they want to that they're talking about single payer is because they obviously don't mean to do anything on it. We obviously couldn't get anything done in California, so single payer is a really virtuous thing to talk about because they obviously can't or just choose not to talk about what we should be doing to stop what's horribly unconstitutional and violent and illegal that our government is doing in Syria. So that is my first red flag about draft Bernie and Bernie in general. And I'm just going to walk through a few red flags, as I will call them, or room for improvement, whatever you want to call them, about the draft Bernie movement, based principally on I have not yet seen, and please forward me if it's on the website and I missed it somewhere, or it's anywhere, where people are saying loud and clear, draft Bernie movement, asterisk, Bernie, really could you stop with the war drum banging, because that's actually really important to us, and the people who are organizing it maybe should take more responsibility in holding Bernie accountable for his views if you want people to be like, okay, I'm going to participate in your draft Bernie operations that are happening before midterms, which is kind of weird to me to begin with. So the way I think about this, and here's my thought process when I'm evaluating stuff. First of all, I need to reiterate to people, sorry, let's take a drink. I'm like, there's gonna be like people outside like listening to my stream. I guess I could crack these open a little bit. So we'll see if somebody comes by. So I guess that was kind of bad for the lighting. So, draft Bernie. So the first thing that I want to quick talk about is the status quo. And my goal in life is to change the status quo because the status quo is bad. And the concept of the status quo, and underlying to a lot of the root of the word progressive, not entirely, but part of the concept of progressive is it means changing the status quo. So it's an acceptance of what the status quo is and using an approach that will change it. That's kind of the concept of progressivism in a way, right? That term has been used in different ways for political uses over time. So the status quo in America, since Citizens United, as all of you know, and it's ridiculous I even even say this, but I like background, but the status quo in America is that money is everywhere. Money has freedom to operate in any type of group that it wants to. The Citizens United ruling allowed businesses and corporations and special interests to use money however they want and never have to tell us. Never. This literally was the only floodgate they needed to open. They didn't do Citizens United to be like, let's just kind of squeak a few loopholes in about campaign finance. They literally were just like, nope, let's flip the switch and let money be everything. And let's create types of organizations that can be free from transparency. That was the whole point of Citizens United, okay? So we are now living in a status quo that is ruled by Citizens United in terms of money has an absolutely unbridled effect on our political process, and that comes in obviously in a lot of ways. There's super PACs, there are corporations that use that money, there are hybrid PACs, there are nonprofit 501c4 organizations which are different from 501c3 organizations. There's lots of different entities, lots of different structures, media is mixed in, right? This is the problem, is that all of this stuff, all of these big money interests have basically consolidated because they're all rich and want to help each other stay rich and get richer. And so what our status quo is this cloud of corporate money that hovers over our politics and, in my opinion, pollutes our politics, is absolutely toxic, is part of the reason we have got complete obstruction since that ruling took place, because it's basically just constant state of backdoor deals taking place and Congress meeting and yelling at each other trying to pass their backdoor deal that the other person doesn't know about. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a paralegal, not a lawyer. So the status quo in America and what my goal is, and if your goal isn't this, that's fine, and we can disagree all over the place, and people always assume everyone has the same goals when you're chatting online. But in my opinion, and in my purpose for my tweeting and commenting, is to challenge the status quo, and that is the moneyed corporate control of our politics. So, to me, what we need to be challenging is that money in politics exactly. And it doesn't mean being like, oh, no big deal when we see things that are like just kind of question marks. It means being like, hey, let's ask some questions. Because why would it be a problem to ask questions, right? This is the reoccurring theme to everything I do, is I'm just asking questions. And then people get so mad that I ask the questions, and I'm just like, well, that's weird. If you had a good answer, it would be easy to answer, and you wouldn't have to be mad, and I'd actually be like impressed that you had a good answer for that. Like you thought it through, and it was like legitimate. So the way I look at politics is examining the corrupt corporate status quo and all the different ways that money tries to get its way in. And draft Bernie, the way I think about when I'm analyzing things is these terms of red flags, right? Look at red flags. You don't necessarily need to ever try to agree with someone that everything is the same version of wrong or illegal or what, right? Everything needs to be investigated, right? Any type of issue, any type of concern that we have, if you have a problem with your relationship or with your job or with your school, an issue in itself doesn't ever necessarily get boiled down to one issue. You can say, oh, I've got a red flag with my supervisor, we've got to see how it plays out. Or, I've got an issue with my spouse, we're going to work through it. You know, in my opinion, it's not healthy to isolate those individual situations and say they have certain outcomes and it's in black and white. In my opinion, it's the smart way to analyze things and then to investigate things over time is to watch over time and identify red flags and examine them with other people so everyone can come together and a variety of viewpoints can help you decide what the best viewpoint is, right? It's pretty straightforward. So when I've been listening to all this stuff about the draft Bernie movement and as it's been coming up, the first thing I thought of was I was like, okay, well, you know, as much as I've been a Bernie guy my whole life, it's really weird that we're immediately after 2016 talking about 2020. We literally have 4 years until then, and any astute politician knows that you need to plan not 4 years ahead of time. And so I'm like, this is a really weird thing to be starting right now because we don't even know what's going to happen in the next 2 years. How do we know, A, that anyone in particular is going to run in 2020, but also what the country is going to need? It's just really presumptuous to me to think that immediately after the 2016 election, you're already trying to plan for the 2020 election. And you know who the first person I thought of was? Hillary Clinton. I was like, that's just something Hillary would do. Where it's like, oh, we didn't win this time. Let's immediately start planning to try and win again next time. Even though it does the American people no service to be thinking about what's going on in 4 years. And in fact, in my opinion, it does a disservice to distract them from what they should be talking about in that moment. But they're going to go ahead and do it anyway. And it reminded me of the Ready for Hillary super PAC. And for those of you who were paying attention back then, when Hillary Clinton lost to Obama, there were, a bit long. It was after the State Department. That's right. It was after she left the State Department. The Ready for Hillary super PAC just came up. And here we were watching the Clinton Foundation. Be basically an international super PAC, shady enough. And then we saw the Ready for Hillary thing, and I'm like, well, this is just kind of like more Citizens United gray area where it's like, oh, I guess we will be able to raise money for the presidential election before the presidential election. It's not necessarily that important to compare them to Draft Bernie to Ready for Hillary yet, because obviously it is so early in the Draft Bernie process. I guess I can just shelve that consideration because there's more. So that's my first red flag is they need to be calling out Bernie for his regime change bullshit. Number two, it needs to be looked at with high scrutiny because anything being done, any presidential race being prepared for 4 years ahead of time, whether it's Bernie or anyone, in my opinion, needs to be looked at. Are there any Republicans that are being drafted for 2020 right now? Obviously, Trump's in office, but like, if the Republican Party or another party were trying to already be like, we're going to run someone in 2020, I'd be like, well, maybe win something in 2018 first, and then that'll be impressive, and you'll be able to prove that you'll do well in 2020, because right now it's anyone's guess. So that's my second red flag. And then when you go to the Draft Bernie website, and I know a lot of good people are working on Draft Bernie, and I support the general concept that it's creating a third party, right? I, again, consider it to be a poorly timed situation. I consider it to be problematic that Bernie's name is being invoked because there's obviously no guarantee that he will run. He's obviously an criticizable politician that deserves heavy scrutiny because of his pedestal. And like I said, it just kind of smacks to me of let's get out ahead of the campaign in organizing as much as we can, even if we're not necessarily fundraising yet. This may be the bridge. If anyone's read Hillary Clinton's books, and most recently the Shattered book, there's really interesting backstory about the relationship with Ready for Hillary and the Hillary Clinton campaign. And not to say that it's definitive, because that book is obviously done from people who were, within the campaign, but to some extent that's exactly the type of thing that we would want to be examining if Draft Bernie becomes a big operation. Watching that into a potential Bernie Sanders presidential operation, we would need to watch that. I'm not going to tell you right now that I know what it is. I'm just saying this is what I'm watching now, and I'm allergic to the concept of the Democratic Party, so I don't want anything to do with it, to the extent that I don't even want people telling me to consider it, because I've made the decision and they're defending it in court, and Bernie hasn't said anything about the DNC fraud lawsuit. So if you're going to try and tell anyone that they should be considering this as an organization strategy, to me, it's just got red flags all over it. And the funding, it's not clear on the website exactly what's going on. And I would love for it to be really clear, but it just keeps saying nonprofit over and over. And I would love for someone to go find or share what the exact entity is and tell me, or get it from the horse's mouth. I mean, let this be a challenge to Draft Bernie. Totally put all of your transparent information on your About Us page, because there's just a list of names, which is not that much, doesn't mean really anything. If you're not afraid of it, why won't you hide it? If it's too early, whatever. There's a crowd pack donation page where you can donate your money, but it says it may go to the national party. It's like, well, that's weird. If you look up the entity in the Draft Bernie thing, it's like Progressives it's some general group. It's not specified. And that's, to me, what the red flags are. I'm not definitively saying it's anything. It might be an evolution, and they're going to announce it later. But the whole concept is that they're going to run a third party. Well, interestingly, if you click around and look at their writing on their website, they talk about this petition that's like Draft Bernie. It's not saying commit to drafting for a third party. It's all in the context of Bernie. And I'm like, that's problematic, especially because when you go and look at their material, it's like if you look at what they're basically the conversation pieces they're trying to use to people to start to get to sign the petition, it's basically just saying, hey, did you support Bernie Sanders? Then sign this. It's not saying, hey, did you support Bernie Sanders? Well, then you might be the type of person that would support this type of thing. We know Bernie's got some issues right now, but we're trying to start a third party, so it's not saying any of that. It's saying, did you support Bernie? Then sign up. Sign this petition. That doesn't mean anything about having an actual path to getting on the ballot in 50 states in a way that would win in 2020. And so if these people who are organizing it really wanted to impress people, they would be like, look, this is our strategy, not only to win in 2020, but we're so on top of our shit, we know what needs to happen in 2018 in order to achieve those goals. You can't tell anyone in their right mind you know how to win in 2020 when 2018 hasn't even happened yet. It's absolutely absurd. And the people that are wasting the years 2017 and 2018 planning for 2020 are setting up everyone that they're going to eventually support in 2018 for failure, because right now you're not building those networks and focusing on the ground, because you're focusing on something that's going to completely be rendered different in 2018 regardless, in whatever way the outcome of the 2018 election is, right? So that's basically, to me, the underlying major red flag about this is that it's very committed to draft Bernie on this petition, but it's not really clear that they're developing and determining and presenting a smart strategy in general, period. But moreover, they're not presenting a smart strategy to 2020 and not even a strategy to 2018. No mention, no comments, no nothing. And I know Real Progressives has had Nick Brani on here. I know that a lot of these folks are in our network. And I invite you all to be transparent and post all that stuff on the Draft Bernie website, because I don't see it on there, and that's the problem. So feel free to put it on there. But when Draft Bernie is operating at the same time as Our Revolution, which is a 501c4 group, which is the term, which is the word, term is dark money for 501c4s, and I'll explain this because I don't say dark money casually. Dark money is a specific term for a 501c4 organization, because 501c4 organizations are considered nonprofit, but they are not required to disclose their donors. Some of them do disclose partial lists because they can disclose whatever they want. But underlying all of that, there is no legal requirement for a 501c4 to disclose all of their donors on any basis. So any group that's choosing to be a 501c4, such as Our Revolution, is choosing to ultimately guarantee that there'll be never any certainty that you'll be able to know if the transparent documents that they're presenting or the lists or whatever, there's never ever a legal guarantee that they have to be telling you who's giving them money or how much or when or why. And so that's what a 501c4 group is. It's called a dark money group. And Our Revolution obviously is building off the Bernie brand. Draft Bernie is building off the Bernie brand. Bernie is going on this the Unity Tour flopped. The Democrats are having their worst fundraising ever, and now Bernie's like, oh, let's do a healthcare rally, even though I'm going to finish my article about the single-payer sham, but even though the Democratic Party is selling the cheap, busted version of Bernie's single-payer plan, so he's now promoting the Democrats' faulty version that's not even getting anywhere, obviously in California. So it's like the whole Bernie brand right now is being used to prevent people from joining a third party and to prevent, yeah, I understand what goes into organizing a nonprofit. And if Draft Bernie wants to explain what they're doing, saying we are registering as a 501c3 right now, we are planning to change onto whatever, I would love to read all of that in fine print on their website, because it's not there. And I understand the different components that go into forming an LLC, into 501c3 and 501c4 and incorporation and hybrid pack. Like, I've done the research, guys. And the details are not there. And to me, when a politician is asking for your trust, they should be able to tell you in simple terms what the situation is. It shouldn't have to be, go to the website and read in the fine print. It shouldn't be that. If someone deserves your trust, and if someone is asking for your trust, they should say, interesting. Well, great. And you know, this is the other thing too, is that there's going to be a diverse group. Obviously, not everyone in Draft Bernie is going to be on the Democrats' non-transparency side, right? Hopefully, I guess, like, something breaks out of it. I mean, the underlying problem to me is still Bernie's support for war, and still, why are we even talking about 2020? It's a waste of everyone's time, and it's going to hurt progressives in the short term, planning for the long term, because it's unpredictable. So those are my main two grievances with Draft Bernie. But if they're asking for my time, which I'm getting asked for their time, they're asking for my time, right? People are like, we retweet this, I'm like, well, if you want an answer, here's your answer. It also says donate, 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 right? So if I or the public is being asked to donate, I think it should be really clear on the website, because that to me is what we need to change about the status quo. And what I'm seeing about this and all of the groups affiliated with the People's Summit, hopefully they prove me wrong and do amazingly good things. But they're all kind of seeming to funnel right toward the Democratic Party. And that to me is a problem, a big problem. And maybe I will exist on the internet to be the devil's advocate for the Democratic Party. And I think that that's healthy. And I encourage people to always think, if you have any experience with litigation or in courtrooms, right? So opposing viewpoints, opposing parties, right? We've got the DNC fraud lawsuit, we've got the plaintiffs, we've got the defendants. A mental exercise for everything you ever do in your entire life, always, 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 is think in the dichotomies. You will learn so much about the spectrum of every decision and the spectrum of every concept if you think of not only the vision or the idea that you have, but you also challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to think of the absolute, absolute, absolute polar opposite of that. So when I was in high school, in debate, it's very straightforward how they teach you this stuff, is you sit down and you look at your issue that you're going to debate, and it's Draft Bernie, and you're like, okay, I need to learn this shit inside out, because why? Because in debate, I could get assigned to argue either side. So I'm going to know the shit inside out so I can argue in favor or I can argue against. And if anyone wanted to say, Zach, can you argue in favor of Draft Bernie? I'd be like, sure, I can do it, because I know my shit. I read about it. I can tell you all the pros, and the good things and the sunny side of Draft Bernie. I could do it right now. I'm not going to, because plenty of people are doing that. Guess what's missing? The dialogue on the opposite side that's challenging people to get out of their I'm only seeing it my way, and to think about the opposite side of that. Not only is it helpful to be able, black and white, yin and yang, the concept of the dichotomy teaches us how to contrast, right? Not only do you learn by understanding the two extremes of any debate, it strengthens your ability to argue on either side by knowing both, but it also makes sure that all of this dialogue in the middle is happening. If we only have dialogue on the Bernie Sanders side and the I kind of like Bernie Sanders side, what's getting lost here? What's getting lost in there? That's important information, in my opinion. And it's so bizarre that I've just randomly become this person on the internet that's just not afraid to type some devil's advocate type questions into my Twitter that make people so mad because it seems like I'm antagonizing or something. And I'm like, no, I'm legitimately just asking. We saw this problem with the mainstream media conglomerating around Hillary Clinton, as all of the media was saying the same thing. People are like, Zach, you should complain more about Trump. And I'm like, so here's the point. We've got all these people, the entire mainstream media is saying that. I don't need to say that too. We got people saying that. The voices that are not being heard are the voices that need to be heard, in my opinion. And we've got all of these voices saying one thing, and it is becoming my job, apparently, to say what's not being said. And that is very, very, very important. Whether you agree with me or not, I don't care necessarily. Really, I don't. It's all about conversation and talking about it and knowing your shit so you can argue it when you need to. And a lot of people have this mentality where you have to like agree with someone, like where there's just like, oh, same as me, I'm the same. Oh my God, I'm the same. I'm not like that. I never was like that. And I don't know, it really just blows my mind. I mean, maybe it's partly because I'm gay and I've always felt completely different from everyone. And so presenting the concepts of me being in opposition to everyone around me has been innate in my existence. So maybe that's part of it. Happy Pride Month. Maybe that's some underlying thing there. I don't know. I definitely feel like I have more willingness to stick up for what's right because I've been bullied since a child for being gay. But it's just one of these things where it's like, The devil's advocate position needs to exist in all debates, period. And anyone who is just obsessively considering only one side of the debate, in my opinion, is setting themselves up for complete failure, because you're not going to understand the whole spectrum of debate. You should know your opposing argument. Like, I still, Jared and Elizabeth are doing a million things, but I could argue the DNC's lawsuit in court for the DNC better than they could, because I thought through Jared and Elizabeth's side so much that I know exactly what I would argue if I were the court. That's not because I agree with this viewpoint in any way, obviously. It's mental exercises, it's debate. You think about both sides for that express purpose, to think about the opposites. It's so straightforward, and people get so angry about it. No, it's just conversation, for the love of God. We are bombing 7 countries. My tweets are not the problem. Swear to God. It's insane. Don't demonize devil's advocates, especially when they're in the 99% and we're trying to hold leaders accountable. It's ridiculous. It's the same exact thing when people are like, Zach, lower your standards and vote for Hillary Clinton. Zach, she's good enough. She's a Democrat. They're better. The same exact thing is now happening with people like, Zach, it's fine. Bernie's better than most of them. Zach, it's fine. It's like, okay, I'm not even saying that I wouldn't vote for Bernie in 2020. What the hell are people putting these assumptions in? I'm not saying anything about if I'll vote for Bernie again, if I'll tell. It has nothing to do with that. I'm saying let's ask questions now to hold our leaders accountable. I've been saying it forever, and I will always say it. And you can criticize people and still vote for them. It's a novel concept, I know, but you can. I can say all of these critical things and still go and fill out a ballot, and it counts the same as everyone else's, as long as the Democratic Party isn't rigging it. Like, it's not. Don't be allergic or afraid of or insulting to people who are advocating for exploring both sides of viewpoints. It's just in general a sign that you don't have an argument, because you can't comment on anywhere in the spectrum, and you can't say, well, Zach, I agree, some of the things about Draft Bernie are little question marks, but the majority of the people that I know that are working on it, are doing a good job from my view, and let's give it some time. I don't really agree with what you're saying, but it's just a social media post. Interesting. Thanks for the thought stimulation. I totally disagree with that asshole, but I'll respect his opinion. It's ridiculous. It's just so ridiculous how often people try to demonize the debate on any issue. And I highly encourage people to embrace opposing viewpoints and the concept of debate and challenge themselves. This is what I've always done my entire life, is think about what I feel, and if I want to think something or know something, I'm like, okay, I better not say a goddamn thing about that until I've thought about the absolute complete opposite and made sure that that's where I stand. It's just a mental exercise, and you can make it as big or as small as you want, but it's just about asking questions, and in my opinion, it's putting blinders on if you just want to say, this is what I think, and I'm thinking this, and anyone who says I should consider something else is wrong, I'm insulting you, blah, blah, blah. It's unflattering. It's not healthy debate, and go to a debate class or go to watch a meet at a high school in your area, and you will learn so much. It's amazing. And opposing viewpoints, I tweeted this a while ago, and I really appreciate, and I always do, the people who support me and who speak up for me in times when I'm getting criticized for trying to hold their leaders accountable, because I'm constantly getting shamed for it. And I appreciate the people who support it so much, because it's like we have to always have that. And it's legitimately, it's very suppressive, especially because I'm gay. It's very oppressive to tell people that your criticisms for the ruling class, zip it. Zach, the ruling class is in charge of this country. Stop complaining about Bernie. It's Bernie. It doesn't matter. He's a good guy, Zach. It's really a unfortunate attitude and approach to discourse, in my opinion. And obviously I'm just some random ass person, so if you appreciate my opinion or agree with it, that's totally on you. But I obviously pissed off all of these people today just by saying, hey, Draft Bernie looks a lot like Ready for Hillary, there's some red flags on the website. It's like people just come with the insults instead of saying, where were the oh, I did my research and saw the red flags too. I don't think they're a big deal because. It's never that. It's never, I disagree because. It's always, you're wrong, or, oh my God, Zach, what's wrong with you? You're drunk, you're stupid, you're an idiot. It's like, it's so insulting, especially from people when they've like supposedly been your friend for a long time, and they'll just turn on you and insult you because you're expressing a viewpoint they oppose. I find that to be unattractive as a quality in a person and unhealthy in political debate. So that's my stance on that. I need to fill this up a little bit more because we're going to shift now to the Russiagate disaster, or the Russiagate disaster the New York Times had, and then we'll wrap it up. What time is it? Can anyone tell me what time it is? I probably am over because it's down to 34, and that usually means that the other channels have started. But if someone could quickly tell me what time it is, that'd be great. And get your drink ready, whatever your drink is, because the New York Times today had to issue the mother of all retractions on the Russiagate bullshit. Cheers. We're going to do like 5 cheers to this. So here's 5, number 5, 807. Perfect. I'll wrap it up. So we're going to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cheers. 5. That's our first of 5 cheers to the Russiagate story being bullshit. It's obviously been unraveling. Most of us here in Real Progressives have been calling it as bullshit since it started cropping up during the primary, right at the same time, coincidentally, as the DNC got exposed for rigging the primary. All of a sudden, Russia rigged the primary. It's like, we've all known that. But it's been slowly debunked. And this line that they've been parroting over and over and over, 17 American intelligence agencies. They've been saying this number 17 and using this catchphrase over and over and over and over for the past how many months? 6 months? I don't know how many months. I mean, anyone with critical thinking skills has been able to understand that the Russiagate story has been bullshit from the beginning because all of the sourcing has always been bullshit. Swiss cheese everywhere. Caitlin Johnstone, to talk about my favorite person again, has a hilarious article that came out way back in the day, right when this first came up, where she was just like, anonymous sources released unnamed people talking about gossip that basically all of the Russiagate stuff has been so, like, it's just mental gymnastics to try and figure out a way for them to say it was Russia that hacked the election without legitimately exactly saying it. And they've been using this 17 intelligence agencies line this entire time. And finally today, and this is exactly how we have to be watching the mainstream media for the truth bombs that come out. It's not going to be headlines. The New York Times is not going to announce, we've been lying to you this whole time. They're just going to randomly issue a correction. So we did 5. Let's do drink number 4. I'll try and finish this in 4 more sips. Might not work. So they issued a retraction that said, oh, sorry, it was context to this article. But the retraction said, we've been citing resources that have said 17 intelligence agencies have been confirming Russian meddling in the United States election. In fact, it was 4. And it lists CIA, FBI, NSA, and like a security council that's I'm unfamiliar with. But basically corrupt, and corrupter entities, and it's not even from those entities. It's still false. It's still generalizing sources from within James Comey's FBI. And God, do we even need to say any more about trusting the CIA? Are you fucking kidding me? So basically today, between the Project Veritas bombshells that exposed that the Russiagate story was just, it obviously benefited them for ratings also, but between that this week blowing out the water that the Russiagate story is good for ratings, that Van Jones called it a nothing burger, and now the New York Times has officially said that 17 intelligence agencies thing, yeah, every time we said that, John Podesta said that in this interview today, every time we said that, that's wrong. And anyone who has ever repeated that line either believed it gullibly or didn't believe it and said it anyway. And either of those options are highly, highly, highly incriminating and unflattering, especially if those people are connected with any of the other scandals that are going on right now. So here's our 3. So once we get to 5 drinks, that'll be our complete toast to the end of Russiagate. So the New York Times released that. So we are seeing the complete collapse of the mainstream media. And I totally called this in my article, and I named it that for a reason, because this is now officially post-capitalism media beginning. And when I put that article, Jordan Chariton, and the impending collapse of mainstream media, I mean, like, CNN, New York Times, I mean, all of this is getting debunked, and it's amazing. And it's obviously going to take a long time for people to really understand it. And these, you know, New York Times lied us into Iraq. They're trying to lie us. They're trying to lie us to you know, what's the phrase? Inflame tension with Russia through Syria. That was part of the whole reason they wanted to push this Russian narrative. And this is a really important thing to remember, is that not only were they trying to push the Russian narrative as an excuse, A, B, to cover up for Podesta and Hillary Clinton's own Russia ties, but also C, to help build the case for removing Assad, because ultimately it's between us and Russia on that, and anything they could do to corrupt Americans in thinking that Russia is the boogeyman will help them ultimately in convincing people that Russia is the bad guy, and that means Russia supporting Syria makes Syria the bad guy also. So it's really, really, really important to the Syrian crisis that this Russiagate story is being debunked heavily, and all of the people who are pushing it are being called out. So drink to that. But obviously, it also completely undermines everything the Clintons have been saying, everything the DNC has been saying about the Russians. I mean, it's all coming to haunt them right now. It's amazing. And we just really need to keep grilling on the internet all of the Democrats that were involved in this. The DNC lawsuit, the other DNC lawsuit, the criminal investigations, the Loretta Lynch lawsuit, CNN firing all those people for the bullshit Russia story, New York Times issuing this major retraction to a major piece that they've been talking about for the past 6 months. We are seeing an absolute historic collapse of the Democratic establishment and institutions, and that's fan-fucking-tastic, and we need to keep hammering at that, and that's what we do well, and that's why I love all of you, is because we just keep hammering at it. And yeah, a lot of the stuff we say is gonna be really challenging, and it's a really nice quote that I have always kind of enjoyed as a person who's experimented with art. I kind of consider myself an artist, but art is supposed to disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. I've always loved that idea, and the truth is disturbing because we live in a world where the media has created a different version of reality based on what they want you to think. And yes, it's jarring to see the truth. Yes, it's jarring to accept the truth. And yes, it is easier to avoid the truth. But in the spirit of Independence Day and what independence means to me, independence means being free from entities that are trying to lie us into war and trying to lie to the point that we don't realize how much of our freedoms are being restricted by this corrupt establishment that has control over the TV that we watch, the radio that we listen to, the movies that we watch, and the government that determines our paychecks, our livelihoods, and the quality of lives in our neighborhoods. So as much as the truth may be uncomfortable, I'm going to be sitting here yelling about it, and apparently the more everyone else sells out and doesn't talk about the truth, the more people that are going to be tuning in, so that's cool. My name is Zach Haller. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks everybody for joining me. I really have met so many amazing people through this whole experience, so thanks to all of you who watch and tune in regularly. I'm really excited about launching the next stage of my YouTube channel. To give you a to give you a little teaser, so Caitlin Johnstone and Mike Sinato are both going to be contributing to my YouTube channel. They're going to be my first two contributors. I'm getting them set up to have full reign on my channel, and it's basically going to be a grassroots channel, and we're going to be rolling out more information, and people are going to be able to submit videos similar to here in Real Progressives, but with more of a YouTube focus. So watch out for that. That's going to be coming next week. My name is Zach. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Have a great weekend, and keep advocating for peace, and don't take no for an answer when people tell you to quiet down, because we need more louder voices speaking for peace right now. And I will catch you on the flip side. Have a good night and a good weekend, everybody.